Yes, it seems to be live. Hello, everyone. My name is Mark Krantz, and I'm here from the People's History Museum. And today we're having a Have Your Say, which is a roundtable discussion, and it's all about independent living in the time of the COVID-19 pandemic. This is a Have Your Say, which we have once a month at the People's History Museum, but today's is part of and linked to a project and a series of exhibitions and studies that there's been at the People's History Museum around the theme and under the guidance of Nothing About Us Without Us. So what I was going to do just to start off and to welcome everyone and to make sure that in the YouTube, if you are watching us on YouTube, you can see that there is a chat box on the right, a live chat box. And if you want to say anything or comment or ask questions, please do. At the end of today, we'll be here for about an hour, but at the end, afterwards, the whole of the discussion and all of the speakers will be available to watch on YouTube at a later date, pretty soon after today. So I just want to just sort of check in and just sort of get things going and say, my name is Mark. I'm at the moment more or less on lockdown. I'm a carer and I'm living in Chiltern in South Manchester. So I just wanted to ask if Anise would like to come in and just check in and say hello and check that everything's working.
Hi there, I'm Anis Akhtar. I'm based in Liverpool, but currently home in Bradford visiting my family.
Okay, that's great. And Rick, do you want to say hello?
Hi, I'm currently isolating in Timperley.
Okay, that's great. Things seem to be working. And Gemma, do you want to check in?
Hi, I'm Gemma. I work for Greater Manchester Coalition of Disabled People. I'm a project worker here, but I'm currently isolating in Bolton.
That's great. That's fantastic. And Dennis, hold on a second.
Hi.
Oh, great.
I'm Dennis Queen. It's finger spelled DENNIS QUEEN. I'm in South Manchester, Burnage. Great.
So welcome to everyone watching and welcome to everyone on our panel. Let's start off with the Have Your Say and pose this question and for discussion and consideration, and that is, what about independent living at the time of this this pandemic? Does who on our panel wants to get started and say something first? Okay, Gemma.
Hi again, everyone. So one thing we'd sort of be saying with sort of independent living is, what does independent living mean to you? So what we find is that independent living can be different for different people. Sometimes that might be having a PA support, or sometimes it might just be having aids and adaptations in your own home. I think GMCDP would sort of say there are 7 needs to independent living. This would be information, whether it's in a standard format or accessible formats like large prints and brailles, which it helps disabled people make those informed choices about their own life and support. We said it should consist of peer support, which comes in the form of advocacy, sort of having a friend or somebody who could fight your legal battles for you. Housing, it's important for everyone, but it's especially important for disabled people, especially accessible housing. So things like widened doors or having a wet room in your bathroom could be particularly important to you living independently. As I mentioned briefly before, sort of equipment, aids, adaptations, that's allows disabled people to do things without assistance. So I use accessible technology in order to enable me to work at Greater Manchester Coalition of Disabled People. Another one could be personal assistance. So that's employing your own personal assistant and sort of having another person to help you out do some of the things that you might not be able to do. And the personal assistant should really sort of be a person-centered approach where they will sort of work around yourself and what you want to do. Another one is transport. So all public transport should be accessible for disabled people. And although we've seen the changes over the years with the buses being able to be dropped and wheelchairs being able to get on them, there's still quite a long way for that thing to go with public transport. And accessible environments, so things like roads, paths, access to buildings, things like that, whether it's flat. Those are all types of things that would aid our independent living and make us sort of engage more with society, I guess. But for me, what independent living really means is that I can live with my partner in this little small bungalow with my little dog, with support from my PA to help me to work and to also help me to cook, to help me clean, those types of things like that. It also allows me to have a little bit of a break from my partner because I like doing quite girly things like makeup, hair, clothes shopping, those types of things like that. And my partner would not really be interested in doing anything like that. And it also allows me to have some choices about who I employ and who I don't, because I often find that social services can give you the wrong message on who you can employ and what for. And they sometimes stipulate to you what they can do, where I don't think that should be the case, especially for independent living. Mark, you're muted, sorry.
Okay, thank you very much. I've just been talking to myself. Thank you very much, Gemma. That was a really comprehensive and really good introduction and start. Who on our panel wants to come in next and talk about what it is from their point of view? Rick, shall I put you on the spot here?
Okay, I'm on the spot.
Sorry.
I think what it's meant over the last 10 years has been a struggle to stop it being taken away. There used to be a thing called the Independent Living Fund, which was a national scheme, very efficient, ran pretty damn well. And one of the earliest things that the coalition government did was to close it down. So there were numerous court cases, consultations, which all really basically said this is going to not be great. They nevertheless went ahead and closed down the Independent Living Fund. So people in receipt of that, and there were about 19,000 people across the country, they then went under the standard local authority social care. And there's obviously been cases where they did not get the level of support they previously used to get under the ILF. So I think one thing that independent living is it is a political statement. It is a human right, and it's one that has been under attack for over the last 10 years. So in Greater Manchester, we've, as part of the Greater Manchester Disabled People's Panel, which is what I do as a day job, we've looked at that, and we've tried to enhance what we can do at a regional level, despite failings from central government. And I think it's should be considered really a human rights campaign that everyone should be involved in, because when your fellow citizen is having their rights protected, that actually protects everybody.
That's great, Rick. Thank you very much. And next, who's coming in next? Is it Dennis? Just a sec. Yeah.
Hi there. It's a good question. What does independent living mean to you, as well as kind of the wider issues around independent living? So for me personally, independent living means being able to stay with my family, being able to raise my own children. I'm just being able to live a relatively ordinary life where I can come and go when I want to, and when I can get up when I want to, and when I can make my own decisions. And as Rick has just really nicely put, we are supposed to all have a right to this choice and control. And I think probably what all of us here fear is that we feel a lot of disabled people, and that includes a lot of different people that people don't always think we mean. So we don't just mean people with physical impairments or older people, we mean disabled people of all ages. We don't feel everyone is getting that access to an independent life. Many people are living in institutions because they have no choice. And we've been campaigning for nearly 50 years now as a UK modern disabled people's movement for these rights to choice and control. And yet many of our people are not accessing it. And I think many of us would say that this has, there's a lot of reasons. The people often say it's incompetence. I don't think it's incompetence. I think the system is designed this way. And while it's a for-profit system that deals with many people, unfortunately, we're never going to get the independent living that we need, because people make an absolute shed load of money out of creating segregated forms of living for disabled people. And really that starts with prisons, moves out to ATUs and other similar places, that's assessment and treatment units, and then into the adult institutions where you may go for people with learning difficulties and autism, and some people with physical impairments. Some others of those people are then housed with older people, and people don't necessarily really have a choice to have independent living as they would have wanted it. We would like everyone to now have that choice. And I would certainly argue that a big problem here is that some people make a lot of money out of our incarceration, whatever the reason. And until we can have a system that doesn't rely on that, we're going to carry on just being basically the end product of a system. Like in a factory, our care workers in a lot of the institutions are effectively the product workers who deal with the product, and we are just a product. And renting us, owning us, makes people a lot of money.
No, absolutely, Dennis. Thank you very much for that. We're going to bring in Anis now. Let's just work this out. Start the video. Yep.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to echo and agree with everything that's been said, the political stance, and thank you for everybody sharing their individual reflection on what independent living means to them. So I'm 33, and it was only back in 2017 when I got my first real taste of independent living by going away to university. And yes, living in halls as a mature disabled student who's also BAME, Black, Asian, minority ethnic, was difficult. But I've recently, in March, just before lockdown, moved to my own studio, and it's given me that freedom of being able to sort of cook with some help and enjoy my hobbies. And so for me, it's been a great change, so that I can start learning those independent skills on how to live. And one of the points I've made throughout these meetings with my friends and colleagues during this project is the fact that had this been a different time and institutionalism had been prescribed to us as disabled people, we probably would have found lockdown and the whole COVID-19 matter a lot more difficult to cope with. And as we slowly come out of lockdown, I guess for general public, we are once again the community that's often forgotten. So whilst everybody else is going out with their masks and things and starting to go back to some degree of normality, I guess it's going to once again take disabled people that little bit longer to get back into things, because we were kind of excluded in the first place. So for me, independent living is a wonderful thing, especially for young people. And I guess it takes young disabled people that first step, whether they're living with their guardians or living in care or living with their parents, to be able to have the confidence with peer support to say, yes, I can live on my own or with my peers or with my friends. And it's a very liberating thing. And like it's been mentioned, it's, you know, everybody else, non-disabled people, have the opportunity to live on their own, live with their partners. So disabled people should also have that choice as well.
Absolutely, Anis, absolutely on that. What you brought up there, and we want to move on and discuss a bit more, is the independent living and what we had in the past with the ILF, and then the reality of some people who are able to become more independent and have supported living today. This is where we are, but we're now also got this question of, well, what about life with this COVID-19 pandemic? And I wanted to ask our panel here to perhaps say a bit more about how is the C19, how is, you know, living under lockdown and being in isolation, how is this affecting things? Is it making it a lot harder, a lot worse? You know, what do people think about this? I'll bring in Gemma first. Hold on a sec. Right.
Hi again.
Oh, you're there. Okay.
Yeah, hi. So I think it's showed a lot with regards to disabled people, and it shows how disabled people living in their own homes and environments have fared better in regards to the pandemic, and they have had fewer amounts of death than those who are living in care homes or any other form of like housing units for disabled people. And it is getting quite scary, to be honest. We actually had Rick do a fantastic survey about how it's affecting disabled people living in their own sort of environments and stuff. I'm sure he could sort of update you a little bit more on that.
That's great. Did you want to come in, Rick, and say something about this?
Thank you, my colleague Gemma, for dropping me in. So yes, this was the GM Big Disability Survey. And a big takeaway from that was, though, there are 2.2 million people in the government shielding list, which, you know, meant they had access to certain extra support. If it was in place, it wasn't always there. It wasn't perfect. Food parcels weren't always right, you know, that kind of thing. However, there was a large section of people who needed to shield and quarantine themselves, who were not officially on that shielded list. So they found really that they were struggling to get things like online supermarket deliveries, to get medicines, and also you got the more complicated issue of you have carers or PAs coming in to give your daily support. That can be an infection risk, because, you know, that person could be going elsewhere, doing whatever, you don't know. So also that was a factor, and then access to PPE for those carers and personal assistants, and all these things, you know, combined together to make it quite challenging, to put it diplomatically. And we surveyed people, and we also engaged at the highest levels of the GM authorities. We were involved in the humanitarian assistance group, and also our reports were going straight to GM Mayor Andy Burnham and to Health and Social Care Services. So as issues came up, we would identify them, and then we would pass them on and go, you know, pay some attention to this needs helping. So I would hope that, you know, that will have improved things, although it has been an extremely difficult time. But I think it is absolutely true, as Gemma said, that people who had established independent living lifestyles much less vulnerable to the virus than people who were in institutions. And as Dennis has said, that becomes a huge risk factor. When you've got a lot of people concentrated in one space, that is easy for a virus to spread. So one of the takeaways from this is that actually, to make us more resilient to further waves or to other outbreaks, is independent living is a key part of making society more resilient in the future.
No, that's a crucial point there, Rick. That I think needs spelling out much wider, than just the people that are affected, because the virus is a threat to everyone, and more independent living is going to, for people with disabilities and disabled people, is going to mean that everyone will become safer. It's really, really important. I'm going to bring in Dennis here. Hold on a sec. Yes, start video.
Hello. Yeah, I'll try not to say too much, but it's difficult because that's a big question. How has COVID-19 affected independent living, rather than how has independent living affected the situation with COVID-19? They're kind of two different questions, because it's affected independent living. I rely on two PAs, personal assistants, to support me in my independent living. There's been various issues for those of us who employ our own support. Rick has mentioned some of them. Personally, it's been a bit of a nightmare with my staff. So I've been in what I was calling protective self-isolation before they invented the word shielding, since 4th of March. So soon after I locked down, my first, my main PA out of the two I had just went AWOL. So then I hired again, and my new PA stole from me. So then we had to sack them, and I now have, this is the third, so it's the third different main PA I've had during lockdown. So that's kind of how it's been for me personally. But it's absolutely the case, as Rick has said, that maintaining my independent living at this time has been life-saving, because there's some very interesting things going on. I'm in the group that Rick mentioned, that the government only just admitted around when they said shielding was ending, that they had even identified a second group of people. So they have two groups of people. They have the extremely clinically vulnerable, who are in the shielding group, and they now have this second group of what they call people who are clinically vulnerable, which is the group that I'm in. And there's some really big contradictions and problems with how that's been organized. So the first thing is, they're saying that people in that second group, they're implying that we don't need to shield, and we all need to shield pretty much like anyone else who is more vulnerable. And so that group hasn't been supported. But the other alarming thing is, a lot of the people in that group, and I am also one of those, don't meet the criteria for automatic intensive care unit support if we were to be dying from COVID-19. So not only do we have all those other risks, we know that we are more vulnerable, and we know that we are not getting equal access to healthcare. So that's terrifying. And again, it was obvious what would happen in the care homes from the minute lockdown begun. I had a small nervous breakdown in the middle of week 2, because I had already realized what was going to happen. And that took some fighting to get back from, especially when I saw some of our own people throwing people under the bus and saying, oh no, it's only older people with these impairments that we should worry about, or you should exclude my impairment group only from these different rules that say you don't have the same access to healthcare. So it's incredibly problematic, and the changes in how things are done have affected us a lot. But Rick is right, that because I have independent living, I've been able to avoid COVID much more easily than if I'd been put in an institution years ago and my kids have been put in care and all of that, because I can limit who comes to my home, and because they have been able to continue to make sure I can get food, medication, that I'm getting up in the morning, that I'm staying healthy enough, I don't become more ill, and so on. So yeah, how COVID has also affected independent living in a wider sense is I think that it has shown up some problems. You know, certainly the government don't recognise we exist really. To them, there's been sort of two kinds of disabled people: the old ones who are dying, which is who they like to sort of lump them in as, and then kind of younger working age disabled people, but it's almost like there's no one in between for them, whereas people of all ages have been affected. So it's also been harder to get people's independent living packages going. So I work with various disabled people to support them to get theirs started, and those are very difficult. I've not seen a single one come through panel during this entire time. So it's a big question, and I think I'll stop there for now.
Lots there to think about, you know. When you were talking there, I recalled a number of people saying during the early stages of lockdown, you know, I am not dispensable, you know, I am not disposable. It was almost that there was a whole section of people that they'd already decided we don't care what's going to happen to you, you know, which was, you know, very alarming. I want to bring in Anis, who was explaining earlier about having personally been able to have more independent living at the moment, which is really good to hear. But what do you think about in general, Anis? Let me get the video working here. How is things now with the C19 and independent living?
Yeah, so when lockdown first started, I just moved to my own studio, and in the beginning it was very new and exciting in some ways. And because I do a lot of volunteering and conferences and campaigning and things, it was that kind of thing that I missed the most, because all of a sudden the things I do to, you know, occupy my time and give my time to support others was kind of not happening anymore, because everybody was now in lockdown. And I think as always, disabled people were really forgotten about, because when you saw, I don't really follow the news, but when I watched YouTube videos to see what was going on with this whole COVID-19, it was, you know, disabled people's experiences weren't discussed or in mainstream media. And I followed some webinars by the British Sociological Association, and there was an interesting paper by a PhD student at Durham about COVID and the invisible of visual impairment, and how and it was a very interesting talk. And another one by the BSA was about, you know, children being at home with their parents with additional support needs and things, and that dynamic of having children with additional support needs at home all the time. And where I live in Liverpool, there are two special schools next door to me, and it made me stop and think about, I went to special school for the first 15 years of my life, but it wasn't a residential school. And I think my next step would be to kind of get in touch when the new school year starts, and ask the principal of the School for the Blind in Liverpool to see what was going on. I've come to realise that some disabled people's organisations and things all seem to go on to Zooms and Team. And I'll close by saying, like I've mentioned at most of these meetings that we've had with the People's Museum, I feel that had this been back in the olden days, where if you were a disabled person, you had no choice and you were sent away and segregated and institutionalized, I think we would have been just very similar to the BAME community. We would have been another community that was larger numbers of disabled people would be dying of COVID, because, like Rick has said, concentrating a lot of people in one place causes, you know, greater infection. Like Dennis has mentioned about, you know, the protective equipment wasn't only in hospitals, it was also care homes where people were living, but also people were coming to your homes as PAs, as carers. What about them and their protective equipment. So there's lots to digest here, really.
Thank you very much there, Anis. Thank you. Thinking about now, what about going forward? Because independent living has always been, I know many of us would say, it's always been a right. It's always been something that should have happened more. There was independent living funds, and there are people living more independently now than in the past. But we've got a new situation now with the coronavirus, and I know there has been some talk from the current Prime Minister about, oh, Christmas, it'll all be, we'll be back to normal. There is going to be no going back to normal. There's going forward to living in this situation under the coronavirus. So where are we going to go? What needs to be done and needs to be said to maximize independent living at the time of this coronavirus? I think I've got a number of people great want to come in. Dennis, did you want to start? And then I'll ask Gemma.
Yeah, I think we need an immediate, urgent inquiry into what's gone on. And I think it should be led by disabled people's organisations with a track record. I think it should happen now, because if there is going to be a further big group of people catching the virus, we need to understand how to make sure we don't have another, what was it? I think Rick knows the figures, but it's nearing 40,000 at least that we think may have been disabled people that died, and we can't get accurate figures on a lot of people. So if whatever the figures are, we need it to not happen again. So we need an immediate inquiry into it. It needs to be led by us, not by this government, because this government just allowed it to happen. And then I think disabled people need to be able to give recommendations as to how we're going to move forward. And I mean urgently. I mean with a month span, and I mean before the winter. We have just shown actually in Manchester through the big survey that Rick's talking about, we're quite able to find out stuff and work really well if we're given the opportunity. This is our business, it's our people, and it's us that need to tell government what needs to happen next. And I strongly suspect that at the moment, the only people they're talking to are unions who do not have the same interests as us. We are just their end product. We are the thing their factory manufactures. We have to be able to represent our own interests. I'm not saying that workers don't have a say, and I think we'd probably agree with most of their demands anyway. But how care happens is something that has to be informed by the people that use it, not by the people who govern it, not by the people who get paid to incarcerate us. And I think it's really important what Anis was saying before as a young disabled person, that our fight for independent living has enabled Anis to start as a young adult, at least within his 20s, in his own place. And I'm worried that it will be Anis's age group at this rate will be the last group. And Anis is right that because of modern times, more of us have access to this independent living. But we need to remember that there's something over the last figures I saw for incarcerated disabled people in the UK, and I mean outside of prisons now, and just in what would usually be called care units. So this isn't including places like mental health hospitals, for example, that also need to be drastically changed, and changed by the people that use them. The last count that I heard about 10 years ago was that we have something like 340,000 people living in institutions. And I would bet a lot of money on the fact that most of those people are only there because they didn't really feel they had a choice. And that is the problem. If you want to live in a group home by choice, you should get to design what those homes are like.
Thank you very much there. Gemma, did you want to come in?
Yeah, so I just wanted to sort of echo the points that Dennis was saying, really. So we would hope that sort of this pandemic shows that the government separating disabled people from the rest of society actually doesn't work at all, and it doesn't offer a chance for people to live independently. We'd hope for a true independent living in which we know we all matter, we know all our true choices, we have the right to our own lives, and we can engage in the world around us without having any barriers there. It will take a lot of effort, and I think the steps that Dennis has just mentioned is probably the best way to go about it. But we have made a lot of recommendations on this in the past as Greater Manchester Coalition of Disabled People. We feel like we were fighting these fights like way back in 1985 when we first started, and it seems like we're going to have to sort of fight these fights all over again. But we are ready to do that. We are ready to fight, and we just need, you know, like Dennis was saying, sort of more input at higher levels in which disabled people can actually talk about the care that they're receiving.
That's great. Rick?
Oh yeah, just to just comment on what Gemma said about having this fight again is actually GMCDP's archive has been a big piece of work developed by Linda Marsh, who's I think part of this People's History Museum project as well. And we had a launch of the archive several months ago now, and it was interesting reading documents and papers and books and speeches from 70s and 80s, and they could have been written today. It is unfortunately very true. We are having to refight things that we thought we had fought and won in the past, and had either, you know, slowly decayed or were taken away. So we're now kind of repeating a lot of these issues. In terms of independent living, there is the Reclaiming Our Futures Alliance, which the coalition and other groups are part of. It's an umbrella of disabled people's organisations nationally. And the project there is the National Independent Living Support Service, which just briefly, it gives a new universal right to independent living that is enshrined in law, co-created between government and disabled people, funded through general taxation, managed by central government, led by disabled people, delivered locally in co-production with disabled people. And the important thing about that is that it's a new and properly funded service. I know at the moment a lot of the ideas around social care and independent living are to build it as a service as part of the NHS or in partnership with the NHS. I think that's maybe a debate that needs to be had, is do we want it separate or do we want it part? I think a lot of the people that think the NHS NHS and social care should be like one thing, and maybe not considering the limitations of the medical model, and not thinking about how the social model of disability has actually revolutionized how we've thought and lived our lives. So there's already a lot of work ready to go about how we build independent living, how we deinstitutionalize people, which again is a huge issue that is, you know, we are at loggerheads with government thinking, who've just announced a lot of segregated free schools. Rather than having inclusive education, they seem to be going in the opposite direction towards segregation, which is a backward step in our opinion. And I think there's been evidence here by how Anis has talked that, you know, this independent living and becoming, you know, what you want to be in your life in all of society is something you need that independent living support. And certainly something that the GM coalition of disabled people that we notice is often you will have under 18 you're in youth services, and then there's a break, and then you become an adult under adult services, and often they just kind of just stop. There's not really a passporting through. People are having to sort of reapply all over again and go through lots more sort of, you know, proving yourself and bureaucracy. And I think that's almost as one thing I'd like to mention is, you know, if you're not a disabled person, there is not a lot of bureaucracy you have to wade through to prove that you're not a disabled person. But if you are a disabled person, you are constantly having to deal with bureaucracy all the time. And that in itself is a barrier and a discrimination, which that would be really nice if we can sort some of that. But put it this way, disabled people and disabled people's organisations have plans, have expertise, and are ready to move forward on this. We need the support of other partners, And we also need the government to listen more than it has done in the past. It maybe is now. It was embarrassed last week on several things. And we know that this week, a bunch of quite hurriedly arranged meetings have happened between the Cabinet Office and disabled people's organisations. I think they're realising that, as has been said, there's been a disparate death rate. Black and Asian minority ethnic communities have seen a much higher death rate. Disabled people have seen a much higher death rate. People in poverty have seen a much higher death rate. Older people in care homes, much higher death rate. In equality terms, the government's response to COVID has been an unmitigated disaster, because I don't think they're that interested in the ideas of equality. And that is actually something we really do need to deal with. If there was an inquiry, it would need to be judge-led and have power to compel witnesses. What did happen in care homes is pretty scandalous. It looks like they used them as a kind of pressure valve to make sure the NHS wasn't overwhelmed. So they were putting people back into homes who were infectious. So that you had people dying in homes, but also infecting other people. And that people concentrated together. You had that really just an ideal environment for the virus to spread. And I don't think the government has even begun to be taken to account for what's happened there. It is yet to be fully uncovered, the scale of that problem.
Thank you for that, Rick. The disproportionality is becoming more and more in focus, isn't it? At the very start of the pandemic, everyone was locked down, and there was this story told, we're all in it together. And in some ways we were all in it together, but we weren't all in it together, because it was and it's coming through more and more now about if you're poor, if you're disabled or have disabilities, if you are from BAME community, Black community, you're going to be affected and are being affected more. The call for a public inquiry into all of this that's come on from our panels today, I think is clearly one that we'll be able to take up in a wider forums. But I just want to sort of move on to just ask people, ask our panelists to talk through and think about this disproportionality, but also about how do we take the fight forward. I was really cheered to see the promotion for today's Have Your Say had a photograph from the Disabled People Against the Cuts and others who were protesting at the Tory Party conference in Manchester, and that had a big impact. And I saw some faces there on the photo. That was a memorable time, I think that. But political campaigning, advancing this independent living, what are we going to do next? And how are things going to be easier and how are things going to be harder? Ines, did you want to come in and say what you think about all of this?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to Rick, Gemma and Dennis for all the comments that they've made, and I was umming and ahhing to what was being said. And yeah, I think, like Dennis has said, the time is now for us disabled people and members of disabled people's organisations to actually process what's been going on, because I know there were certain things going on by big charities pooling together to sort of, debates around wearing masks, which has come up recently, and also about there not being enough shopping slots for disabled people who would regularly shop online, not losing that independence as well. So I think a way forward is to perhaps look locally originally to see, just to kind of catch up. This is what I'll be doing personally, catching up with local disabled people and disabled people's organisations and charities to see how people have coped, what issues have come up. And I think it's important, like Dennis has said, that this needs to happen immediately, because the likelihood is that there could potentially be another lockdown. And like I've said time and time again, we were neglected. Disabled people were neglected. We were told everybody was in it together, but all the media press and everything, it was, as always, very ableist, very much, you know, disabled people being an afterthought. And what we're seeing now in shops and things with social distancing, there's still a lot of, you know, nobody stopped and thought about how that's going to affect somebody with a long cane or somebody in a wheelchair, because as always, we're just an afterthought. So me personally, it would be to get in touch with local disabled people and try to reflect on what's happened. And like I think everybody said, is to be prepared for the next lockdown, because it's the virus has not gone away and it could creep up again at any time. And I think it should be disabled person led who approach, along with disabled charities as well, who we work with collaboratively, to sort of start saying, you know, here's a reflection of what happened locally, and these are some of the changes that need to happen for the next time, or for disabled people to be seen. You know, we've never been seen as equals. We've always been othered, and we often talk about the medical and social model of disability, but I always try to say to people, there's also a financial model, because when we have new shopping centres open, they claim to consult us and we advise them, but then they go and build these new buildings, and then they come back to us when there's inaccessibility issues. So yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
Okay, that's great.
Hey. So yeah, the two things. So the disparities that have happened under COVID are simply kind of the outcome of the pre-existing disparities that already made people more vulnerable to things. And particularly if you're multiply marginalized and you meet intersections around oppression. So as we know, that many of the people who have had the worst outcomes are people of colour, or Black and minority ethnic people who are also disabled. And these disparities, they were all there before. So from the work I do supporting other individuals as a volunteer to establish independent living, I have seen over the last 10 years a frightening, a shocking, to me shocking, because it would be, but to nobody else shocking, a shocking difference between how cases are dealt with when the client is white or not. And I have to say this, I don't have much opportunity to say it anywhere. People have been telling us this for a long time. So we need to, you know, again, all of these disparities, we knew they were there. So we know why they've happened. We know what's caused them. It's massive, massive inequality. And the more oppressions that you suffer, the more likely you are to be suffering further abuses and inequalities. And so, yeah, it's doubly hard to get any sort of independent living at all if you are a person of colour. I see it with every single client that is a person of colour. It's twice as hard, if not more, every single time. It should not be that way. So I believe now that we have an absolutely clear two-tier system. I would love to see that further investigated as one thing. The second thing is how do we fight back now? And oh, Mark, I don't know what the differences are going to be. As you know, I was thinking of you saying I recognise a few faces from protests. Mark and I have been on many protests together, and for different issues in different groups that we both support. So you know, I love to protest, and that's really not viable at the moment. I'm still at home. What I would say though is the more wider answer to me is how two things. So one, and these are the same things we always say, or I always say really. So one, always fight back. If you can, always fight back. Don't accept the things that happen to you as a marginalized person. If you can fight back, fight back. Your fight is worth it, and it's part of a wider fight. So the second thing is, if you can, if you have got the resources and the time or the interest, please, please join your local disabled people's organisations. That's organisations run and controlled by disabled people that are local to you. There's some national groups as well, like National Disabled People Against Cuts. If you can't find anywhere at all and you want to have some connection to activism, at least please come and join us if you can. And just so come together, and then we fight back together, because I don't know what the answers are, but I do know that we always come up with the ideas of how to fight for what we need to fight for together. And that's all disabled people of all kinds, of all ages, of all backgrounds.
Yeah, so I'd just like to sort of echo the same points as Dennis with regards to how I feel we should be sort of moving forwards. With regards to that, just again, join your local disabled persons organisation. You know, we cover the whole of Greater Manchester, but we're not, we don't say we can't accept anyone outside of Greater Manchester. It's just that obviously we focus more on Greater Manchester issues. So my advice would be to sort of join it. You are worth the fight. And again, like Dennis, not entirely sure how we're going to go forward with this, but we're going to be strength in numbers. That's the way I can see it. So the more voices sort of who get involved with us and get involved with our campaigns, whether that's just making a poster, whether that's, you know, creating your own video to try and allow people to see how things are happening, whether it's attending our various different steering groups or research opportunities that we have at the coalition, then, you know, these are all ways that disabled people can get their voices heard and be heard in the wider society. I also feel that being part of a disabled persons organisation also gives you this form of empowerment to sort of say, well, actually, you don't really understand my needs, and you don't really understand why I might be angry or I might be upset. Whereas when you join a disabled persons organisation, those issues seem to sort of be understood by everyone who's involved in it. And I've read something pretty interesting recently called Access Intimacy, and that's just saying disabled people understand the barriers that other disabled people are facing just automatically, because we already know that, you know, one part of society is not made for us to sort of engage with it or to try and make ourselves known in that part of society. So it would be great to join those disabled persons organisations, and, you know, the title of this project that we're involved in at the moment with People's History Museum is Nothing Should Be Said About Us Without Us, and that's definitely the way I think we need to move forward from here.
Yeah, at the risk of being boring, everything what they just said, it all starts with disabled people getting together and organising. Absolutely, full stop, just 100%. So wherever you are, find out if you've got a disabled people's organisation. If you've got one, great, join it. It will become stronger from you joining it. You will find your life is more interesting and exciting. If there isn't one, think about starting one. I do love the fact that the literal meaning of conspire is literally people together breathing. So conspire together, get together, use Zoom, use Teams, do it over the phone like the old days. There used to be, you know, in the process of developing the social model, the phone tree was actually something that used to happen quite often, how news and information and activism was spread. So join a DPO or form a DPO if you can. And, you know, all of us will network together as much as possible, and we will become a force that will have to be listened to. We are definitely in Greater Manchester. There are some more doors open than there used to be across the country. You know, that needs to happen everywhere else. And it is always, as Gemma said, it's nothing about us without us. It's us doing it, and then our voice being listened to. We know how to do things. We're the experts. So let's get in there and make this happen. It is going to be a fight, yes. But you know what? As always said, if you don't fight, you'll always lose. If you fight, you've got the potential to win there.
That's great, Rick. That's inspiring final words. You know, I was just thinking when you were speaking there, the reason that we're even able to have this Zoom discussion and have it on YouTube and people to talk about what we're going to do next is because of all of the struggles that have gone before. You know, we didn't get here from nowhere. There's been we stand on the shoulders of giants that have gone before us in these struggles that have gone on for a long while. Can I say, you know, personally, I've found this, you know, I feel heartened having here. I feel stronger, I think that's what I would say, having been part of this collective discussion. And I do hope that those of you that are watching on YouTube can draw strength and guidance and inspiration from our panel today. Please, if you're watching on YouTube, you can comment about what you think about what people have said, and just put put it in the chat box on the probably on the right of your screen. Just to sort of looking at the clock, we're going to be finishing soon, and I just wanted to ask our panelists to sort of, as they checked in, sort of to check out really, and just say, you know, what are we looking? What are you personally looking forward to? And before that, sorry. What do you think about our discussion so far? And then what do you think you're going to be looking forward to on a personal level going forward? Just to say thanks to everyone, and thanks to Mark, who's been doing the BSL sign-in, and to our technical support team behind the scenes to try to make sure and have made sure that everything's worked quite well. So Gemma, did you just want to start off and check out?
Yeah, thank you. So I think, again, like you said, Mark, there's been some very sort of interesting discussions here in which hopefully disabled people feel empowered now about their choices, and, you know, that they know things that government or any professionals in their lives might be saying might not necessarily be true, and that they should sort of be speaking to disabled people to get their sort of professional opinion on it, I guess. I guess sort of like all I wanted to sort of round up with is it took me a while to get used to sort of COVID-19, working at home remotely and being socially distanced or isolated in my own house. However, I've sort of had a little break and had a little think about it. And the way I would like to end with this is I'm actually excited to see change now. I feel like it's something that disabled people have been oppressed with for a very, very long time. And you feel it in your bones and in you, everything that you do, you feel that you've been constantly oppressed. So having this, having the government have a rethink about what they are doing and how they look at disabled people could hopefully influence some very positive change in the future. And I always try and tell people change is a good thing. Change is not a bad thing. Change is one of the best things that can happen for society.
Anissa, are you okay to come in and make some final comments?
Just to close briefly, I will say that, yeah, I'm very excited, especially becoming a member of Greater Manchester Coalition of Disabled People and trying to set something up in Liverpool, if not across the district of Merseyside. So if anybody on YouTube lives in Merseyside, please do get in touch and keep an eye out. And yeah, I'm really excited because through this project I've met some amazing people, and to continue to look at things intersectionally as a straight, disabled, intersex young person from a BAME background, I think intersectionality needs to be explored more. And like Rick said, if you don't have a local DPO, you know, think about setting one up.
And just a final word from me. We can do it, and only we can do it. You take care. Always fight back. Bye.
What Dennis said. Yeah, the future is better. We can make it better. We have to make it better.
Okay, that is great. Good to end on a positive and encouraging note there. And, you know, we're going to take this struggle forward. So can I say thank you to all of our panelists, to Anis, to Dennis, to Gemma, to Rick, and thanks to the behind the scenes people from the People's History Museum, and to all of you watching on the YouTube channel. We do have these monthly Have Your Says, and we'll have one coming up in August. And if you subscribe and check it out at the People's History Museum website, or from the email, you'll get details of what's happening next. So a big thank you to all of you watching, and a final thank you to all of our panelists here. And nothing about us without us. This struggle will go on, and we will take the struggle forward and hopefully improve the lives of disabled people, but of other people wider in society. So thank you very much indeed. We'll end the meeting now.